Last summer, as restrictions lifted, a youth group who normally take loads of young people away on a residential hired our building so that they could meet in a safe way. They had security on the door, and one day I had to come and get something from the office, and I turned up and used my Magna key to get in, and the security said, "Excuse me, who are you?" Rightly so. I said, "Oh, I'm actually the pastor of the church." They said, "Have you got an ID badge?" I don't have an ID badge, but we do have a huge welcome board with mine and Rachel's and Ezra's and Zuri's pictures on. So I pointed at it and said, "It's quite big, but will that do?" And we laughed and they let me through. And a couple of other points in the week, I'd walked past the church building and those same security guards started conversations with me about faith and spirituality, because now they know who I was. And now they knew what I did. It changed the way that they saw me. This prayer, in a lot of Bibles, isn't called the high priestly prayer as we discussed on Monday, but is split into three. Jesus prays to be glorified, Jesus prays for his disciples, Jesus prays for all believers. And today's passage, verses 6 to 19, is where Jesus prays for his disciples. But those titles in your Bible, they were put in much later. Those divisions are different in different versions. They're not part of the original text. And actually, Jesus doesn't just fully pray for his disciples here. He's continuing to model some deep truths. He's continuing to show the lessons that we learned on Monday, that identity and purpose, that for Jesus, his identity is to share in the Father's glory. That is to share in the character of God and make it known to other people. That he is to be fully known by the Father. Even as his opponents and his disciples don't fully recognize Jesus, Jesus says, "Father, you fully know me, and I know you. I belong to you. I show you." But there's also that part of obedience, that actually part of how Jesus shares in the glory of God is to make that glory known through the cross. That is, to make glory known is Jesus displays the character of God through the cross. Jesus shows the love and beauty of God through being beaten and broken. He shares with the Father. He points to the things that are his and says, "These are yours, Father." He keeps and guards that which he's been entrusted with. And there are similar themes for us, that we're called to have that same intimacy and obedience, to be known by God, to fully seek to know God, to be obedient to him, to look at the good things we have and say, "Father, these are yours. I will keep them, I will guard them, but I will work to glorify you, to show your character through my life to the world." As we outwork intimacy and obedience, they turn into identity and purpose. Our identity is that we belong to God. Jesus talks in this passage about us being consecrated, sacred, set apart. We've been saved for a purpose. He has put us to one side for a special occasion. And this occasion is to make his glory known in the world. And that is the purpose that we have. Our identity and purpose are so tightly wound up. But our purpose is to keep the word, and therefore to manifest, to show, to reveal God's character. I mean, so far so good, right? We are children of God, and we are called to speak about his goodness to the world around us. But what Jesus clearly shows in this prayer is that, first of all, this is costly. To define ourselves not on our own terms, but on God's terms, is to empty ourselves of the status and things that we would push after in order that God may be fully shown in us. To empty ourselves of all of the truths, that all that remains is that we are daughters and sons of God. It's also a journey that faces opposition. Just as our identity costs because our great yes has lots of small no's, so our purpose costs. We have opposition. Jesus speaks about the world and he speaks about the evil one. There are those who want to run counter to the way that God is bringing about his plans and his purposes in the world. And when we try to live out that generous love, it is peculiar, it is strange, it is offensive to people around us. And we have to go through that opposition. We go through knowing that Jesus guards and keeps us, that he walks through that before us. So again, as we read this prayer today, we begin to look through the crisis we're in and life on the other side. And again, there are two questions for us. What are you willing to pay? You might feel apathetic and just struggling with melancholy and sadness during this season. Or you might be feeling overworked and pressed down and busier than ever. What are you willing to pay? What no's are you willing to give in order to say the greater yes to God? To allow your identity as a daughter, as a son, to be first and foremost in your life. And the second question is, after thinking about what we pay, will you really let go? I think some of us in this season feel lost, like we've just got no markers for what our way is or what we should do next. Some of us just feel confused, like there are too many markers and too many things and too many possibilities and too many stats and figures going through our head. But will you really let go of trying to make it somewhere in order to allow God's purpose to be the driving force in your life? Will you stop pushing to go somewhere in order that you could be God's glory in the earth like Jesus calls us to? In order that you would share in that mission to make God known through the way that you live and you love. I pray that as you read this passage today, God would speak to you about who you are and what you are called to do. And if you want to speak about that more, then drop me a text, drop me an email, call me, let me know. We can walk and talk and share about these things more.